My passage is from the poem Tulips. It does not begin, it is not from the beginning of the poem, but partly into the poem. The Tulips is written by SyLvIa PlAtH, a confessional poet-writer. Many of her poems are considered lyrical through their short lines and melody. However, this one follows a more conversational style and draws heavily from her personal experiences. She battled with mental illness and the death of her father for a majority of her life, as she was diagnosed with depression early years of university, and her father died around when she was 8. There was also some infidelity of her husband, causing a divorce and her moving away with her children alone. Many of her poems, and especially this one, draw from her personal experiences. However, she also delves into universal concepts as she discusses female and power dynamics, gender roles within her poems, as well as touching on the Holocaust imagery due to her father's German origin. Her mental illness did eventually take control of her, as she killed herself later in life. Tulips is from a first-person narrative. It is PlAtH speaking, and it has a fixed setting of a hospital, which is unlike many of her other poems. It shows a disconnection from her body and almost an escape from her own reality. Water and tulip imagery give insight to her emotional longing for isolation and escape from pressures and the outside noise of her life. The poem alludes to her hatred for everyday life and a desire for absence or even death. I will be analyzing this poem sequentially, and as mentioned before, the passage is not from the beginning of the poem. From lines 1 to 3, it says, "I have let things slip, a 30-year-old cargo boat, stubbornly hanging onto my name and address. They have swabbed me clear of my loving associations." Continuous baggage imagery is used throughout the poem, and previously the baggage imagery alludes to her own family. The idea of baggage holding on to her is almost her family's dragging her down. Now, this imagery of a cargo boat letting things slip shows a lack of connection to her baggage and maybe a lack of connection to her family, or she doesn't want a connection to her family. It then continues through lines 4 to 7. "Scared and bare on the green plastic pillowed trolley, I watched my tea set, my bureaus of linen, my books sink out of sight, and the water went over my head. I am a nun now. I have never been so pure." The water serves as a purifying image within this section. It shows how this loss of materials within her life, loss of her identity in the outside world has almost cleansed her into her most pure form, as she feels the most natural. Now, this is accompanied with a repetition of S, which almost extends her calm feeling from this environment onto the audience as the repetition of X calms them down through the reading and the poem. In the next stanza, it has an abrupt interruption of this purity and calmness with "I didn't want any flowers," showing an almost already agitated tone and disconnect from the previous calm stanza. It then continues on line 10, "How free it is, you have no idea how free." The caesurary or pause within this line forces the readers to reevaluate how she is free from the pressures and the outside world of her normal life. It allows them to evaluate her situation, but almost exaggerates how free and how simple she feels within this hospital bed. Then on line 12, it continues, and it asks nothing, a name tag and a few trinkets, and then goes on to discussing the peacefulness of death. It reiterates this idea of freedom through this calm area, but also implies that maybe death would be a better option, as a name tag and a few trinkets is usually what's left through a death. So she could be having a longing for death. Then in the next stanza, 15 to 18, she begins discussing the entry of the tulips. "The tulips are too red in the first place. They hurt me. Even through the gift paper I could hear them breathe, lightly through their white swaddling like an awful baby. Their redness talks to my wound, it corresponds. Now, the imagery and the choice of using tulips is very particular, as their red color has a double meaning of passion and violence. Flowers are most commonly given as a family gift to show that you are loved within a hospital bed, showing a passion. However, this passion is hurting her, spurring the violent behavior of these personified flowers. As the love that she's experiencing from her family, her baggage, is not exactly what she wants or what she needs in life, as she just wants to be isolated and cleansed. Now, the simile and personification of these flowers extends this meaning. I could hear them breathe like an awful baby. It emphasizes the idea that the tulips are physically hurting her or severely annoying her. In the end of this stanza, it continues on line 20, upsetting me with their sudden tongues. Now this brings in the imagery of how they're almost beast-like in their behavior, and then is followed by a dozen red sinkers around my neck. Now the assonance of this line causes the rhythm to be slowed down, intensifying the meaning as her family's love is almost strangling her. This links back to previously within the poem where she mentions that her family smiles are like fish hooks, as their passion or their love is physically causing her pain. She then expresses paranoia in the next stanza due to her family presence through these tulips. Nobody watched me before, but now I am watched. This introduces the idea of paranoia and her pure space being now tainted. Then at the end of the stanza, it continues on lines 28 to 29, or 27 to 28, and I have no face. I have wanted to efface myself. The vivid tulips eat my oxygen. Now, when she says I want to efface myself, it can allude to her want for isolation and her longing for isolation, but it also, due to the severity of the language, it may even mean death, as she wants to erase herself from the world or erase herself from this environment. And as again in that last line 28, the vivid tulips eat my oxygen, the love from her family and these tulips are almost suffocating her with and overwhelming her, which contradicts to the previous stanzas where she's expressing this love for isolation and she's being cleansed by this room, but now again it has been tainted. Then she continues in the next stanza by again reiterating this long for to be alone, but then if you observe lines 32 and 33, now the air snags and eddies round them the way a river snags and eddies round a sunken rust-red engine. The repetition emphasizes her agitation towards these tulips, and it shifts the water imagery from a calm and cleansing tool, but introduces it as a violent river, now almost ruining her mental state. It then continues on line 34 and 35. They concentrate my attention. That was happy playing and resting without committing itself. She can't escape from them, the baggage that she previously discussed, her family, and it forces her to think, which is the opposite of her intentions. It then continues, the walls seem to be warming themselves. The tulips should be behind bars like dangerous animals. They are opening like the mouth of some great African cat. The previous line describing them behind bars shows that their presence should be punished for almost disturbing this peaceful environment that she was in, extending on her agitation towards these tulips and almost her agitation towards her family's love. Then the repetition of two similes within the same stanza, one after another, exaggerates the danger of these tulips and their effect on her mental and physical state as a unstable person. again in this final stanza from lines 39 to 43, and I am aware of my heart, it opens and closes, its bowl of red blooms out of of sheer love of me. She begins to reconnect with her feelings and reconnect with the outside world due to this presence of tulips, which prevents her escape from this external world intruding on her life. Then again in lines 41 to 42, the water I taste is warm and salt like the sea, and it comes from the country far away as health. Again, the water imagery has been shifted from the previously mentioned, as it is depicted intruding her life, as salt water is not a pleasant thing to drink or consume. It's almost like a callback to her reality, a callback to her life, as she cannot stay within this pure environment or quiet environment as long as she wants. It then reiterates that this environment calling back to her is going to be the end of her, comes from a country far away as health. Even though she's better within this hospital, she will never be totally well and never be complete or healthy, which reiterates the idea that her mental illness and her longing for death will soon be the demise of her.